The invitation arrived on thick, gold-embossed cardstock. Mercy General Hospital cordially invites you to the grand opening of the Sterling Heart Innovation Institute. Saturday, April 15th, 2 p.m. light refreshments will be served. I held the heavy paper, running my thumb over the raised ink of my name. It would soon adorn a building destined to save thousands of lives in the decades ahead. My phone vibrated. "Jennifer, darling, I have such wonderful news," she exclaimed before I could even greet her. "My garden club has secured a private tour of that new heart center at Sacred Heart. You know, the one everyone's buzzing about. Some wealthy donor bankrolled it. April 15th, 2:00. I glanced down at the invitation clutched in my hand. "That's nice, Mom." "I was thinking you could join us," she continued. "You work at that hospital, don't you? Perhaps you could explain the medical equipment to the ladies. Make yourself useful." I closed my eyes tightly. "I do work at a hospital, yes." "Well, perfect, and dress nicely. These are important women. Patricia Patty Beaumont will be there. Her husband owns 3 car dealerships. And Susan Sterling Vance, no relation to you, obviously. She married quite well. I don't want you embarrassing me in those typical scrubs of yours." "I'll see if I'm available," I murmured. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. What could you possibly have scheduled that outweighs supporting your mother? Your brother always clears his calendar for family events, and he's a vice president at Anderson Consulting. A real executive. I suppose you're busy doing. What is it you do again?" "Something with charities, something like that," I said quietly. "Well, regardless, be there at 2:00 sharp. Don't be late." She disconnected before I could reply. I set the phone aside and surveyed my office. The nameplate on my desk read, "Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery." The walls were papered with credentials: Johns Hopkins Medical School, a Yale residency, fellowships in cardiac surgery and transplantation, and awards from the American College of Surgeons. My shelves held published papers in the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet Asterisk, and in the corner, framed but turned toward the wall to spare me from looking at it daily, was a feature from the Forbes 40 under 40 asterisk list 2 years ago. Dr. Jennifer Chin, the heart surgeon revolutionizing cardiac care. My mother had never laid eyes on any of it. It wasn't that I kept it a secret, though I hadn't exactly broadcasted it, but she had never once asked. She showed zero interest in my career, save for mocking comments about me playing doctor or being still in school at 35. My younger brother, David, had graduated from a state school with a business degree and landed a middle management role at a consulting firm. His title was Vice President of Regional Operations. And even though I knew through mutual acquaintances that he simply managed 12 people and spent his days crafting PowerPoint slides, Mom treated him like he'd discovered the cure for cancer. In contrast, I had personally saved 2,847 lives during my career. I kept a private tally, a surgeon's habit, counting hearts restarted, valves replaced, and arteries bypassed. I had pioneered a mitral valve repair technique now utilized in cardiac centers worldwide. I had even personally donated $15 million, accrued through speaking fees, consulting, and savvy tech investments, to construct this state-of-the-art facility. In Mom's mind, I worked in a hospital gift shop. The most painful part was that I allowed her to believe it. Every time she probed, I gave vague answers. "I work at Sacred Heart. I'm in healthcare. I handle cardiac stuff." She would fill in the gaps with the least impressive scenario, and I never bothered to correct her. Perhaps I was testing her. I wanted to see if she would love me without the validation of success, if I mattered more to her than just being a disappointment compared to David. The verdict after 15 years was a resounding no. My assistant, Alina, knocked on the frame of my open door. "Dr. Chin, your 200 consult is here. Mr. Patterson, the triple bypass." "Thanks, Alina. Send him in." I stood and smoothed my white coat. Oh, and Alina. "My mother's garden club is touring the new center on Saturday. Can you ensure I'm visible?" She arched an eyebrow. "Your mother doesn't know, does she?" "Number, what? That your asterisk the Dr. Jennifer Chin. The Dr. Jennifer Sterling." She gestured toward the office. "You're the chief of surgery and the major donor. You're the woman whose name is literally on the building. How has it never come up? She's never asked the right questions." Elena shook her head, smiling faintly. "This should be interesting. Want me to alert Dr. Morrison? He loves a dramatic reveal." Dr. Richard Morrison was the hospital director, a silver-haired administrator who had been ecstatic when I offered the funds to build a world-class center. He had insisted on naming it after me, and I had agreed, hoping it might finally force my parents to notice me. They had never mentioned it, not once. "Yes," I said, "alert Richard. Tell him I intend to be present for the tour in my full capacity." "Oh, this is going to be good," Alina said with a grin. "I'll make popcorn." Saturday dawned clear and bright. I dressed meticulously, not in scrubs as Mom feared, but in a sharp, tailored navy suit. I looked professional and commanding. I pinned my hospital ID to a lanyard, the words "Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery" clearly visible. I had performed an aortic valve replacement that morning on a 62-year-old grandmother. 4 hours in the OR, each minute demanding absolute precision. By 1:30 p.m., I was suturing. Confident Mrs. Gallagher would be dancing at her granddaughter's quinceanera in 6 months. "Beautiful work, Dr. Chin," my resident remarked as we finished. "Thank you, Dr. Miller. See that her family knows she'll be in recovery for 2 hours, then the ICU overnight. I'll check on her before I leave." I scrubbed out, changed, and descended to the new Cardiovascular Innovation Center. It was a magnificent structure, 3 stories of glass and steel housing the latest advancements that money could buy. There were hybrid operating rooms merging surgery with advanced imaging, a cath lab with real-time 3D mapping, and recovery suites that rivaled luxury hotels, all funded by my donation, all bearing my name. Richard Morrison waited in the lobby with several department heads. "Jennifer, ready for the show?" "As ready as I'll ever be. Where are they?" "Starting on the 3rd floor. Your mother's group has been touring the patient suites for about 30 minutes. They'll work their way down to the lobby for the formal presentation." "Has she said anything?" Richard's eyes twinkled. "Oh, quite a lot, actually. One of my staff overheard her explaining that you work somewhere in the hospital doing something medical, but that your brother is the real success story, a VP at a consulting firm." I winced. She said that in front of the staff. Everyone, Patricia, our head of development, nearly choked on her coffee. She had to step away. "I should have told her years ago," I admitted softly. "Why didn't you?" "I wanted to see if she would value me without the titles, if she'd love me just for being her daughter." Richard's expression softened. "And now you know." Voices drifted from the 2nd floor atrium. The garden club began descending the staircase, a group of well-dressed women in their 60s, marveling at the architecture. My mother led the pack in a cream suit and pearls, presiding over the group like royalty. I recognized faces from my childhood. Mrs. Holbrook, who had always been kind, the other Mrs. Chin, who had married a tech mogul and never let anyone forget it, and Susan Martinez, who had survived high school with my mother and somehow still tolerated her. "These cardiac suites are just magnificent," Mom was saying. "Of course, I don't understand all this medical jargon, but it's certainly advanced. My daughter works here, you know. She could probably explain it, but she's terribly busy, always working. No time for a social life, unfortunately." "What does she do here?" Mrs. Holbrook asked. Mom gave a vague flick of her hand. "Oh, something with hearts. Charity work, I believe." "She's always been very giving and compassionate. Not ambitious like her brother, but sweet. David, that's my son, he's a VP at Deloitte, a very important position. He's actually eyeing executive roles at several Fortune 500 companies." I felt Richard tense beside me. "Shall I?" he whispered. "Not yet," I replied. "Let her finish." The group reached the main floor and moved down the central corridor, where the walls were lined with donor plaques. The women stopped to read names, pointing out mutual acquaintances. Then they reached the end of the hall, where it opened into a grand, sun-drenched atrium. Carved into the marble wall in 2-foot-tall letters were the words, "Chin Cardiovascular Innovation Center." Below it sat a bronze plaque, dedicated with gratitude to Dr. Jennifer Sterling, whose vision, expertise, and generosity made this facility possible. Her $15 million donation and leadership as Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery ensure Sacred Heart remains at the forefront of cardiac care. The group came to a halt. The other Mrs. Chin spoke first. "Diane, is this your daughter?" Mom let out a sharp laugh. "Jennifer? Oh heavens, no, she doesn't have that kind of money. This must be a different Dr. Chin. It's a common name." "But it says Jennifer," Mrs. Holbrook noted quietly, pointing to the text. "Coincidence?" Mom insisted firmly. "My Jennifer is sweet, but she's not. I mean $15 million. She drives a 10-year-old Toyota and rents an apartment." "If she had that kind of money, she would have told me." "Would she, Mrs. Martinez asked, her tone sharp. Mom's smile faltered. "Well, yes, we're very close. She tells me everything." I stepped forward from the shadows of the lobby. My heels clicked against the marble. "Hello, Mom." She spun around. Her eyes widened as she took in my suit, my badge, and the undeniable authority of my stance. "Jennifer, what are you doing here? I thought you were working today." "I was," I said. "I just finished a 4-hour aortic valve replacement. It went perfectly." "Mrs. Rodriguez should make a full recovery." The other women glanced back and forth between us, confusion slowly morphing into realization. "You performed surgery?" Mom asked, her voice thin. "I'm a cardiac surgeon," I stated simply. "Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. I've held the position for 3 years." Richard Morrison stepped forward and extended a hand to my mother. "Mrs. Chin, I'm Dr. Richard Morrison, the hospital director. You must be incredibly proud of your daughter. She is one of the most accomplished cardiac surgeons in the country. We are honored to have her at Sacred Heart." Mom shook his hand on autopilot, her face blank. Yes, of course." "And this generous donation," Richard continued, gesturing to the plaque, "along with Dr. Chin's surgical expertise and her breakthroughs in minimally invasive procedures, has made Sacred Heart a destination for cardiac care. Patients travel from all over the country to be treated by your daughter." $15 million, Mom repeated, faint. "That doesn't even mention her other contributions," Richard added, clearly enjoying the moment. "Dr. Chin also funded our Cardiac Research Fellowship program with another $5 million. She sits on our board of directors, has published 47 papers in peer-reviewed journals, and has trained over 60 cardiac surgeons, many of whom now lead departments at other major hospitals. Mrs. Holbrook beamed. Diane, this is wonderful. Why didn't you tell us your daughter was Dr. Jennifer Sterling? I read about her in the paper. She saved Congressman Morrison's life during that emergency triple bypass last year. That was you. The other Mrs. Chin asked me, her tone now completely transformed, respectful, even awestruck. Yes, I said. And the new pediatric cardiac program, Mrs. Martinez added, the one in the news that saves babies with congenital heart defects. Richard stepped in. Doctor. Chin founded that program. She performs the surgeries herself, 17 successful infant repairs just this year, 0 mortality. The women stared at me with open admiration. My mother stared at me as if she were seeing a stranger. I don't understand, Mom whispered. Why didn't you tell me? I did tell you, I said gently. You asked what I did, and I told you I worked at Sacred Heart. You asked what kind of work, and I said cardiac surgery. You just assumed it was something menial. But 15 million? Where did you get that kind of money? I'm a highly specialized surgeon, I explained. I consult for medical device manufacturers, I've developed techniques that are licensed globally, and I lecture at international conferences. I make wise investments. I live modestly because I prefer investing in healthcare over luxury cars. Your apartment, Mom stammered, you said you were renting. I own a condo in Pacific Heights, but it's rented out. I live in an apartment closer to the hospital so I can respond to emergencies. Cardiac surgery doesn't operate on a 9-to-5 schedule. Mrs. Holbrook touched my mother's arm. Diane, you must be so incredibly proud. My mother's face crumbled, not with pride, but with pure shame. I should have known, she whimpered. I should have asked. Oh God, Jennifer, what have I done? The other women shifted uncomfortably. This had devolved from a tour into a family tragedy. Richard, bless him, intervened smoothly. Ladies, if you'll follow me, I'd like to show you our hybrid operating room. It's one of only 12 in the country with this specific imaging technology. Dr. Chin, would you do the honors? I guided them through the center, detailing the technology in layman's terms and pointing out the operating rooms where I'd performed over 2,800 successful surgeries. I showed them the ICU, where my patients recovered under the care of nurses I had personally trained, and the research labs where we were developing the next generation of cardiac treatments. My mother remained silent, following along with a pale face, her usual veneer of confidence shattered. When the tour concluded, the others thanked me profusely, asking for business cards that I didn't have, though Alina would be getting some interesting calls on Monday. They promised to spread the word about Sacred Heart's incredible program. As the group headed for their cars, my mother hung back in the lobby. Jennifer, can we talk? I have to check on Mrs. Gallagher, I said, a post-op patient. Please, just 5 minutes. I nodded and ushered her into a private consultation room. We sat across from each other, just as I had with hundreds of families while delivering news, good and bad. I'm sorry, Mom started immediately. I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I should have, but I didn't. You did want to know, I replied quietly. Every time I tried to discuss my work, you pivoted. You'd ask one superficial question and then launch into David's latest promotion. You made assumptions about my life and never bothered to verify them. I was wrong, she said, tears flowing. I was so wrong. I thought, because you weren't like David, because you weren't loud and bragging about your success, that you must not be successful. I thought quiet meant failing. Quiet meant focused, I corrected her. I didn't talk about my work because I was too busy actually doing it, saving lives and making an impact. And David, she asked weakly, I could have been cruel. I could have pointed out that David's vice presidency was middle management, that his team was small, and that his salary was less than my annual malpractice insurance premium. But I didn't. David is successful in his own way. He's good at his job. But you turned him into something he isn't because you needed one of your children to be impressive. You needed someone to brag about. That's not fair, she protested. Isn't it? How many times have you introduced David as a VP? How many times have you boasted about his achievements to your club? And how did you introduce me today? Something with charities, not ambitious like her brother, sweet but busy. She flinched at each quote. I heard you, Mom. In the corridor, you told your friends I couldn't possibly be the Dr. Chin who donated $15 million. You said I didn't have that kind of money, that it must be a coincidence. I didn't mean. You laughed, I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts. You laughed at the idea that I could be successful enough to afford this. Your own daughter, and you laughed. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I should have felt vindicated. This was the moment I'd imagined for years. The moment she realized what she'd dismissed. Mom, I just felt tired, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I wanted you to be proud of me, not for the money or the titles, but just because I'm Jennifer, your daughter, the person I am, not what I've achieved. I am proud, she gasped through her tears. I'm so proud. You save lives, you built this center. You're brilliant and amazing. But you weren't proud yesterday, I countered. Yesterday, I was an embarrassment. I was the disappointing daughter who hadn't made anything of herself. That's not true. Mom, it is true, and we both know it. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks, her pearls looking askew. How do I fix this? I don't know if you can, I said honestly. This isn't something you can repair with an apology or a grandly invitation arrived on thick cardstock embossed with gold lettering. Mercy General Hospital cordially invites you to the grand opening of the Sterling Heart Innovation Institute. Saturday, April 15th, 2 p.m. light refreshments will be served. I held the card in my hands, tracing the raised print of my own name with my thumb, a name destined to adorn a building that would preserve thousands of lives for decades to come. My phone rang. Jennifer, darling, I have the most wonderful news, my mother exclaimed before I could even greet her. My garden club is getting a private tour of that new heart center at Sacred Heart. You know, the one everyone's been buzzing about. Some wealthy donor bankrolled it. April 15th at 2:00. I glanced down at the invitation. That's nice, Mom. I was thinking perhaps you could tag along. You do work at the hospital, don't you? Maybe you could explain the medical equipment to the ladies. Make yourself useful. I squeezed my eyes shut. I work at the hospital, yes. Well, perfect. Oh, and wear something elegant. These are important women. Patricia Patty Beaumont will be there. Her husband owns 3 car dealerships. And Susan Sterling Vance, no relation to you, obviously. She married quite well. I don't want you mortifying me in your usual scrubs or whatever it is you wear. I'll see if I'm available, I murmured. Oh, don't be ridiculous. What could you possibly have on your calendar that's more pressing than supporting your mother? Your brother always clears his schedule for family events, and he's a vice president at Anderson Consulting. A real executive, but I suppose you're busy doing. What is it you do, again? Something with charities, something like that, I said quietly. Well, regardless, 2:00 sharp. Don't be late. She hung up before I could reply. I set the phone down and surveyed my office. The nameplate on my desk read, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. The walls were a testament to my career. Diplomas from Johns Hopkins and Yale, fellowships in cardiac surgery and transplantation, and accolades from the American College of Surgeons. Articles I had authored appeared in the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet **. Tucked into the corner, framed but turned toward the wall so I wouldn't have to face it daily, was a *Forbes 40 under 40 feature from 2 years ago highlighting Dr. Jennifer Chin, the surgeon revolutionizing cardiac care. My mother had never seen any of it. Not because I had actively hidden it, though I certainly hadn't touted it, but because she had never inquired. She showed no interest in my profession beyond dismissive remarks about playing doctor or remaining a student at 35. My younger brother, David, had earned a business degree from a state university and secured a middle management role at a consulting firm. His title was Vice President of Regional Operations, though I knew from mutual acquaintances that he managed a dozen people and spent his days crafting PowerPoint presentations. Yet, Mom treated him like a medical prodigy. In reality, I had saved 2,847 lives during my career. I kept a tally, as some surgeons do, a record of hearts restarted, valves replaced, and arteries bypassed. I had pioneered a mitral valve repair technique now utilized worldwide and had donated $15 million of my own wealth, accrued from speaking engagements, consulting, and savvy tech investments, to construct this state-of-the-art facility. My mother, meanwhile, assumed I worked in the hospital gift shop or something similarly menial. The worst part was that I allowed her to believe it. Whenever she questioned my work, I offered vague responses. I work at Sacred Heart. I'm in healthcare. I handle cardiac stuff. She would fill in the blanks with the most mediocre interpretation possible, and I never corrected her. Perhaps I wanted to see if she would value me regardless, if she could love me without the validation of success, if I was more than just a disappointment compared to David. Over 15 years, the answer had been a resounding no. My assistant, Alina, knocked on the open door. "Dr. Chin, your 200 consult is here. Mr. Patterson, the triple bypass." "Thanks, Alina. Send him in." I stood and smoothed my white coat. "Oh, and Alina, my mother's garden club is touring the center this Saturday. Can you ensure I'm visible?" She raised an eyebrow. "Your mother doesn't know, does she?" "Number what? That you are Dr. Jennifer Chin, the Dr. Jennifer Sterling." She gestured toward the office. "Chief of Surgery, Major Donor, the woman whose name is literally on the building." "It's never come up," I said. "How has that never come up?" "She's never asked the right questions." Alina shook her head with a faint smile. "This should be interesting. Want me to alert Dr. Morrison? He loves dramatic reveals." Dr. Richard Morrison, the hospital director, had been ecstatic when I agreed to fund the center. He had wanted to name it after me, and I had consented, hoping it might finally force my parents to notice. They had never mentioned it, not once. "Yes," I said. "Alert Richard. Tell him I intend to be there for the tour in my full capacity." "Oh, this is going to be good," Alina said, grinning. "I'll make popcorn." Saturday dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully, not in scrubs, as Mom feared, but in a tailored navy suit with a white blouse. I looked professional and commanding. I wore my hospital ID on a lanyard, the words Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery clearly visible. I had scheduled a complex aortic valve replacement that morning for a 62-year-old grandmother. 4 hours in the OR required total focus. By 1:30, I was closing, confident that Mrs. Gallagher would be dancing at her granddaughter's quinceañera in 6 months. "Beautiful work, Dr. Chin," my surgical resident remarked as we finished. "Thank you, Dr. Miller. Ensure her family knows she'll be in recovery for 2 hours, then the ICU. I'll check on her before I leave." I scrubbed out, changed, and headed to the new Cardiovascular Innovation Center. The building was magnificent, 3 stories of glass and steel housing the latest technology. Hybrid operating rooms, a cath lab with real-time 3D mapping, and recovery suites akin to luxury hotels, all funded by my donation, all bearing my name. Richard Morrison was waiting in the lobby with several administrators. Jennifer, ready for the show. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. Where are they? Starting on the 3rd floor, your mother's group has been here about 30 minutes. They'll work their way down to the lobby for the formal presentation. Has she said anything? Richard's eyes twinkled. Oh yes, quite a lot. One of my development officers overheard her explaining that her daughter works somewhere in the hospital doing something medical, but that her son is the true success story, a VP at a consulting firm. I winced. She said that in front of the staff. Everyone, Patricia, our head of development, nearly choked on her coffee. She had to step away. I should have told her years ago, I said softly. Why didn't you? I wanted to see if she would be proud of me without the credentials, if she would value me simply for being her daughter. Richard's expression softened. And now you know. Voices echoed from the 2nd-floor atrium as the garden club descended the grand staircase, a group of women in their 60s marveling at the architecture. My mother stood at the center, clad in a cream-colored suit and pearls, holding court like royalty. I recognized a few faces. Mrs. Holbrook, who had always been kind, Mrs. Chin, no relation, who constantly boasted about her tech executive husband, and Susan Martinez, who had gone to high school with my mother and somehow tolerated her. The cardiac suites are just magnificent, my mother was saying. Of course, I don't understand all the medical equipment, but I'm sure it's very advanced. My daughter works here, you know. She could probably explain it, but she's terribly busy, always working. No time for a personal life, unfortunately. What does she do here? Mrs. Holbrook asked. Mom waved a hand dismissively. Oh, something with hearts. Charity work, I think. She's always been very giving, not ambitious like her brother, but sweet. David, that's my son, is a vice president at Deloitte Consulting, a very important position. He's actually considering several executive opportunities at Fortune 500 companies. I felt Richard tense beside me. Shall I? He whispered. Not yet, I said. Let her finish. The group reached the main floor and entered the central corridor, lined with donor plaques. The women paused to read names, commenting on mutual acquaintances, until they reached the end of the hall. The space opened into a grand atrium, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Carved into the marble wall in 2-foot-high letters were the words, Chin Cardiovascular Innovation Center. Below it sat a bronze plaque, dedicated with gratitude to Dr. Jennifer Sterling, whose vision, expertise, and generosity made this facility possible. Her donation of $15 million and leadership as chief the invitation arrived on thick cardstock embossed with gold lettering. Mercy General Hospital cordially invites you to the grand opening of the Sterling Heart Innovation Institute. Saturday, April 15th, 2 p.m. light refreshments will be served. I held the card in my hands, tracing the raised, textured letters of my own name with my thumb. My name was on a building destined to save thousands of lives in the decades to come. My phone rang. Jennifer, darling, I have the most wonderful news, she said, cutting me off before I could even greet her. My garden club is getting a private tour of that new heart center at Sacred Heart. You know the one, everyone has been buzzing about it. Some wealthy donor funded the whole thing. April 15th at 2:00. I glanced down at the invitation sitting in my hand. That's nice, Mom. I was thinking perhaps you could come with us. You work at that hospital, right? You could explain all the medical equipment to the ladies. Make yourself useful for once. I closed my eyes. I do work at a hospital. Yes. Well, perfect. Oh, and wear something elegant. These are very influential women. Patricia Patty Beaumont will be there. Her husband owns 3 car dealerships. And Susan Sterling Vance, no relation to you, obviously, she just married very well. I don't want you embarrassing me by showing up in those typical scrubs of yours. I'll check if I'm free, I replied. Oh, don't be ridiculous. What could you possibly have on your schedule more important than supporting your mother? Your brother always clears his calendar for family events, and he's a vice president at Anderson Consulting. A genuine executive, but I suppose you're busy doing. What is it you do again? Something with charities or something like that, I said quietly. Well, regardless, 2:00 sharp. Don't be late. She disconnected the call before I could offer a response. I placed the phone down and scanned my office. A nameplate on my desk read *Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. The walls were lined with degrees. Johns Hopkins Medical School, a residency at Yale, fellowships in cardiac surgery and transplantation. Certificates of achievement from the American College of Surgeons were displayed prominently, alongside published papers in the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet *. In the corner, framed but angled toward the wall so I wouldn't have to look at it every day, was the *Forbes 40 Under 40 feature from 2 years ago. Dr. Jennifer Chin, the heart surgeon revolutionizing cardiac care. My mother had never seen any of it. Not because I'd deliberately hidden it, though I suppose I hadn't gone out of my way to showcase it either, but because she never asked. She had never shown the slightest interest in my career beyond dismissive remarks about me playing doctor or being still in school at 35. My younger brother, David, had earned a business degree from a state university and secured a middle management role at a consulting firm. His title was Vice President of Regional Operations, and even though I knew from mutual acquaintances that he simply managed a dozen people and spent his days crafting PowerPoint presentations, Mom treated him as if he'd cured a terminal illness. In reality, I had saved 2,847 lives throughout my career. I kept a tally, a surgeon's habit, recording every heart restarted, every valve replaced, every artery bypassed. I had pioneered a mitral valve repair technique now utilized by cardiac centers across the globe. I had personally donated $15 million, accrued from speaking engagements, consulting, and savvy investments in medical tech startups, to build a state-of-the-art cardiac center. Meanwhile, my mother believed I worked in a hospital gift shop or something similar. The worst part was that I had let her continue believing it. Whenever she inquired about my job, I offered vague, non-committal answers. I work at Sacred Heart. I'm in healthcare. I do cardiac stuff. She would fill in the gaps herself, always choosing the least impressive scenario, and I never bothered to correct her. Perhaps I wanted to see if she would be proud of me regardless. If she could love me without the validation of success, or if I was destined to be nothing more than a disappointment compared to David. The answer over the last 15 years had been a resounding no. My assistant, Alina, knocked on the doorframe. Dr. Chin, your 200 consult is here. Mr. Patterson for the triple bypass. Thanks, Alina. Send him in. I stood and smoothed my white coat. Oh, and Alina, my mother's garden club is touring the new center this Saturday. Can you ensure I'm visible? She arched an eyebrow. Your mother doesn't know, does she? Number what? That your Dr. Jennifer Chin. The Dr. Jennifer Sterling. She gestured toward the office. You're the chief of surgery and a major donor, the woman whose name is literally on the building. It just never came up, I said. How has it never come up? She's never asked the right questions. Alina shook her head with a faint smile. This should be interesting. Want me to alert Dr. Morrison? He loves dramatic revelations. Dr. Richard Morrison, the hospital's director, was a silver-haired administrator who had been overjoyed when I pledged the funds for a world-class cardiac center. He had insisted on naming it after me, and I had agreed, hoping it might finally force my parents to take notice. They hadn't mentioned it, not even once. Yes, I said, alert Richard. Tell him I intend to be present for the tour in my full professional capacity. Oh, this is going to be good, Alina grinned. I'll make popcorn. David, Mom called me in tears. What's going on? Me, she found out what I actually do for a living. David, witches. I sent him the link to the Sacred Heart website, specifically the page featuring the Chin Cardiovascular Innovation Center. 3 dots appeared, vanished, then reappeared. David, holy crap, you're that Dr. Chin, the one everyone is buzzing about. Me, yes. David, why didn't you tell us, Jen? Me, I tried, you guys weren't listening. More dots appeared. David, I'm sorry, I had no clue, I just assumed you were a nurse or something like that, maybe a physician assistant. Me, I know what you thought, David. For what it's worth, this is incredible. What you've built, what you've accomplished. I'm genuinely proud of you, sis. I stared at the screen. Was he really proud? Or was he just recalibrating now that he realized I was more successful than him? Me, thanks. How's things at Anderson, David? David, good, busy. Not exactly saving lives, obviously. That work you do is amazing. Me, you do important work too, David. David, yeah, but I'm not you. Another text arrived 5 minutes later. David, Mom wants to have dinner. Both of us next Saturday. Will you come, Jen? Me, I'll think about it. I didn't commit. I wasn't ready. Part of me wanted to make them sit with the discomfort of having dismissed me for 15 years. Part of me wanted to take the high road, forgive, and move forward. Mostly, I was just drained. By Monday, the hospital was buzzing. Apparently, my mother's garden club had spread the news. Suddenly, all of Boston society knew that Dr. Jennifer Sterling, the cardiac surgeon they'd been reading about, was Diane Chin's daughter. The daughter she'd never mentioned. The daughter she'd shrugged off as working somewhere in healthcare. My phone rang all day. Old family friends calling to congratulate me, distant relatives who suddenly remembered I existed, people my mother knew from church, her book club, tennis. I sent almost every call to voicemail. On Wednesday evening, Mom showed up at the hospital. Alina intercepted me in the lobby. Alina, Dr. Chin, your mother is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. I squeezed my eyes shut. Me, send her up to my office. She arrived 5 minutes later holding a small box. She looked older, somehow, and more fragile than she had on Saturday. Mom, thank you for seeing me. Me, I have 15 minutes before my next consult. What can I do for you, Mom? She set the box on my desk. Mom, I've been going through old photos and memories. I found these and thought you should have them. I opened the box. Inside were childhood and teenage photos. Me in my high school cap and gown, clutching my valedictorian medal. Me on my first day of college. Me in my white coat at medical school orientation. Beneath the photos was a folder. I opened it to find every report card I'd ever received, every award, every certificate of excellence. Mom, I kept all of it. Every report card that called you an exceptional student, every teacher who said you were gifted, every award you won. I kept every bit of it. Me, but you never mentioned it, I said quietly. Mom, no, I didn't, and I've been trying to understand why I dismissed you, why I propped David up and pushed you down, why I made you feel like you had to hide who you were. She sat down heavily. Mom, I think I was afraid of you. From the time you were small, you were so focused, so driven. You knew exactly what you wanted and you pursued it with a quiet intensity that terrified me. David was easy. He wanted approval, so I gave it to him. He wanted attention, so I showered him with it. He needed me, and you didn't. You always seemed so independent, so self-sufficient. I figured you didn't need me, so I focused on David instead. Over the years, it had hardened into a pattern, a narrative. David was the success story. You were, I don't even know, the mysterious one, the quiet one. Me, the disappointing one, I said. She flinched. Mom, yes, and I am so sorry, because you aren't a disappointment. You're extraordinary. You're everything a mother could hope for, and I was too blind to see it. Me, why now? Why tell me this now? Mom, because I realized something on Saturday. When I was standing in that lobby, reading your name on that wall, I realized I don't know you at all. I don't know what makes you happy or what you dream about or what you fear. I know the surface. You're a surgeon, you save lives, you're brilliant, but I don't know you asterisk. Me, no, I agreed quietly. You don't. Mom, I'd like to, if you'll let me. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've had 35 years to ask, and I didn't, but I'm asking now. Will you let me get to know you? I looked at this woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, and somehow missed everything that mattered. This woman who had built me up as a child and torn me down as an adult. This woman who was my mother for better or worse. Me, it's going to take time, a lot of time, and I can't promise I'll forgive everything. Some things hurt too much for easy forgiveness. Mom, I understand. I'll wait however long it takes. Me, Saturday dinner, I'll come. But Mom, if this is just about showing me off to your friends now that you know I'm successful. Mom, it's not, she interrupted. I promise. It's about trying to be the mother you deserved all along. I can't change the past, but maybe I can do better moving forward. She left, and I sat in my office staring at the old photos. There I was at 8, beaming over a science fair ribbon. At 12, holding my first biology textbook. At 16, serious and focused at a chemistry lab bench. That girl had known exactly who she wanted to be, and she had become that person despite a family that hadn't seen her, hadn't valued her, and hadn't understood her quiet determination. Saturday came. I drove to my parents' house in Beacon Hill, the house I'd grown up in but never felt like home. David's BMW was already in the driveway. I knew it was his because he'd told everyone about it. I parked my Toyota and walked to the door. Before I could knock, it swung open. Dad, Jennifer, come in. He'd been quiet through all of this, letting Mom do the talking. The dining room table was set simply. No fancy china, no ostentatious display, just plates, glasses, and a roast chicken. David stood as I entered. David, hey sis. Me, David. We sat down. Mom brought out the food. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Dad cleared his throat. Dad, your mother has told me everything about Saturday, about how we've treated you over the years. Jennifer, I owe you an apology too. I've been so focused on David's achievements that I never took the time to learn about yours. Me, you're a vice president, I said to David, keeping my tone neutral. At Deloitte. That's an accomplishment. You should be proud. David, I manage a team of 12 people, David said quietly. I give presentations, manage budgets, and coordinate projects. It's good work, important work, but it's not saving lives. It's not changing medicine. It's not what you do. Me, it's different work, I said, not lesser work. Mom, but you've been letting us think we were more impressive than we actually are. You've been protecting David's feelings and mine and your father's by keeping quiet about your own success. Me, I wanted you to value me without it. I wanted to be enough just as Jennifer, not as Dr. Chin or the chief of surgery or the woman who donated $15 million. Just me. Dad, you've always been enough, Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. We were just too blind to see it. Mom, so tell us. Tell us about your work. Not just the impressive parts, though we want to hear those too. Tell us about what you love, what makes you passionate, what gets you out of bed in the morning. I looked around the table at my parents, who were humble for perhaps the first time in their lives, and at David, who seemed genuinely interested rather than competitive. Me, I love the moment when a heart starts beating again. After surgery, after we've repaired the damage, there's this specific moment when we restart the heart, and it beats strong and steady. You know then that the person is going to wake up, that they're going to live, that they're going home to their family. That's what gets me up in the morning. Mom, tell us about Mrs. Gallagher. So I did. I told them about the grandmother with severe aortic stenosis, about the delicate procedure, and the relief on her daughter's face. I told them about the pediatric cardiac program, about the tiny babies born with holes in their hearts whom I'd helped send home healthy. I spoke of my research into minimally invasive procedures that would ease the recovery process. I talked for an hour. They listened, really listened, asking questions that proved they were engaged, curious, and trying to understand. When I finally wound down, Mom spoke. Mom, I Googled you. After Saturday, I found your publications, your presentations, the awards. There's so much I didn't know. Me, you could have asked any time. Mom, I know, and I should have, Jennifer. I spent 15 years building a narrative in my head about who you were, and that narrative was wrong. Completely wrong, I'm sorry. David, I'm sorry too, David added. For being smug about my job, for acting superior, and for not seeing how incredible you are. Me, you aren't suddenly going to become a different family. This doesn't fix everything overnight. Dad, we know, Dad said, but we'd like to try to do better, to actually know you. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were flawed people who had made terrible assumptions and hurt me through neglect and dismissal, but they were also people who were, at least in this moment, genuinely trying. Me, okay, I said, we can try. The dinner ended around 9. As I was leaving, David walked me to my car. David, I called Anderson on Monday. I told them I needed to scale back my hours. I've been working 60-hour weeks trying to prove something, though I don't even know what. Trying to impress Mom and Dad, I guess. Me, you don't need to prove anything, I said. David, neither did you, he pointed out, but we both spent years trying anyway. Me, fair point. David, I'm proud of you, really proud, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. Me, I'm proud of you too, you're good at what you do, you make businesses run better, that matters. David, not as much as saving lives. Me, it's a different impact, not a lesser one. He hugged me then, quick and awkward. David, thanks for giving us another chance. I drove home thinking about second chances, about the complications of family and forgiveness, and whether people truly change or just learn to perform change convincingly. Time would tell. On Monday, Alina handed me a stack of messages. Alina, your mother called 3 times just to chat. Someone from the * Boston Chronicle wants to interview you about the center. And Mrs. Gallagher's daughter sent flowers. I looked at the messages, the evidence of a life well lived despite a family that hadn't seen it. Me, call the * Chronicle back. Schedule the interview, and call my mother, tell her I'll speak to her tonight after rounds. Alina, really? Alina asked, surprised. Me, we're trying something new. Actually talking to each other. Alina, how progressive, she said dryly. I laughed and went to see my patients. Mrs. Gallagher was being discharged, healthy and strong. A new admission required an emergency bypass. A post-op patient was recovering beautifully. Lives saved, hearts healed, work that mattered, and now, finally, a family who might actually begin to understand. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start is everything.